Give them a shot to do what?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Punch podcast. Once again, joining on the show, my guy, Justin Marvel. How you doing tonight, man?
Not as good as you. Happy birthday. Thought I would forget or not put this on the show. Yeah, everyone has to know that you are the big 21 now. So happy birthday. A little belated, but I couldn't have this show and not wish you a big one. So how does it feel now to be 21 though?
I appreciate it, man. You know, feels good. The birthday was great. Friends and family was great. I went out to Hooters just for the sake of saying I went to Hooters afterwards. Drink was all right. Tastes like battery acid. Won't buy it again. Went to MGM with my other group of friends after that.
Nice.
He bought the 4 of us shots. Almost died. Won't do that again either. So it's a good night. It was a good night. I didn't get drunk. All my friends trying to get me drunk leading up to the party. They were like, "Oh, you gotta get drunk." I did not get drunk, and so that to me is a win because I came home in my right facilities. I was able to go to sleep when I wanted to go to sleep. I was able to wake up like a normal human being, as if I had a normal night out. So it was good. I will say it was a win.
And hangovers are not wins. So yeah, it's a win.
I've heard horror stories, and I'm glad that I did not have one of those. But it did feel good though. Like it was a nice party. You know, family was there, friends were there. Most of the people that I invited were there. It was a good night. Had a good time. And now I don't have to have a party again. Perfectly fine. I don't have to have a party again. I was shaking. I would say this. I walked into the venue and I slapped everybody's hands so hard on it. I was just nervous, bro. I wanted to have a party because I was turning 21, but like I also don't like being in the center of attention. Those two things don't go together. And like I walked in and I dapped everybody up like with so much force and vigor that like I felt bad but like I just needed to get out like the energy. Like I was shaking, bro. So it was good. It was good though. It was a good night, man. It was a good night all the way around. How was your weekend though? I mean, you didn't have a birthday, but it was Memorial Day weekend, man. Did you do anything fun?
When you get this age, you don't do anything fun. You're gonna find out like that birthday party is probably your last. So like enjoy it.
I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. I'll start. I did tell my friends like next year I'm gonna go somewhere. I haven't really been out the country before. I haven't actually taken a trip before. I'm gonna start next year. I'm gonna come here. But next year I'm gonna go somewhere.
You could come here. You know, there's a draft going on, but that's a bit before your birthday for the April. And I'm just saying, you know, next year April.
The draft. You're not wrong. I'm definitely in that point of life where like traveling for sports is the thing to do. There are a couple of things I'm currently working on that I won't really get into because I'm working on it and I want it to be just as exciting for everyone else. But yeah, I'm getting into that point where like traveling for sports for the identity is like kind of the thing. So I don't know. Maybe I do bust out to Green Bay to go tap into the.
Just see.
I don't know. Speaking of Green Bay, we got a schedule to talk about. And it's a good one. It's a good one. It's definitely a good one. And my dad said, take the offer and he'll come with. Great. Let's do it. We're going to the draft next year, Pop. Let's get it figured out.
I'm telling you.
It'll probably be a great environment. We have got a schedule to talk about, and I want to start off by talking about the primetime games because our primetime games, luckily enough for us, are all kind of like just back to back. And like the heart of the season, which could either be a great thing or it could be a not so great thing. We'll kind of see as we get there. But we have a Thursday night game against the Dolphins. It's the Thanksgiving Thursday night game, actually, which is even great. We've got the following Thursday night game against the Lions in week 14. Then we play the Seahawks week 15 Sunday night. And then we play the Saints Monday night, week 16. So all 4 of our primetime games are back-to-back. And, of course, we have I guess it's a primetime game. We open up the season in Brazil against the Eagles, which is also primetime. It's the game that's on. So we got 5 primetime games. 4 of them are back-to-back. before we get into the games themselves, are you a fan of like the having them all consecutive like that? Because it makes the rest pretty balanced, in my opinion, I think.
No, I'm not a fan because like they're emotional highs and lows. And the thing is, like when you're a professional entering or you're no rookie entering a professional setup, the vets always tell you one of the hardest things to do is not to get too high or too low after victory. And having these successive primetime games is going to be hard, like because you're not going in primetime games with bad opposition. Like NFL does not do that unless you get unlucky and have the Jets lose Aaron Rodgers for an entire season, 4 snaps into.
The Saints aren't a good football team. That's just
So like the likelihood, like these are difficult games to begin with, and then you're gonna have to have them back to back to back to back. So like you're on this emotional high. I don't like it. I like it as a viewer, but as a fan or if I was a member of the organization, I would absolutely hate it. Like you're asking these players to keep their emotions in check for 4 straight games. That's pretty difficult to do at this level, but you're gonna have to do it because like you can't look at a loss as too much going into the very next game, especially with NFL, as you know, every game means so much because there are only 17. So every game means so much, and then you only have a week, sometimes less than a week, to get yourself ready for the next one. So, like, if you have a big victory, you got to come off of that high, and if you have a bad loss, you have to come off that low very, very quickly. So, I am not a fan of the schedule for these primetime games.
Well, as my father so illustriously stated, welcome to being a contender. I love it.
Yep.
Hey, you get 4 primetime games after Thanksgiving. You're a good football team. I will say that, including the Thanksgiving game. Now, what I will say is that, and my friend Bryce, he talks about this all the time. We're getting the Cowboys treatment for the first time in forever, as long as I can remember. The Cowboys are playing on Thursday, and they don't get the following Thursday night game. We get the following Thursday night game, which I think is great. And if you look at the games themselves, right? And so to your point, and you said that, you don't play good team. You're playing good teams. I would look at this week 13 and week 16 stretch. The Saints are not a good football team. And I think the only reason
not a good
Saints
are not a good football team.
The only reason why the Saints are playing on primetime is because it's the Monday before Christmas and it's in Lambeau. And so we're the good football. So like it's a home game, which is great. So there's that game. I think we win that game because they're not a good football team. I know that the Dolphins on paper are good. They just got an Odell Beckham Jr., which is cool for them. But like, if we're being completely honest, the Dolphins are they're in that tier of like teams that should be good, but likely may or may not be. Like, you don't know what kind of Dolphins team you're getting on a week-to-week basis. And so to have that game on Thanksgiving, I think that's great. I think that could be a tough game because it's coming off of our NFC Championship game rematch against the 49ers, which we have the week before. And then we have to go the following Thursday to Detroit on the road Thursday night. That could also be a tough one. And then the Seahawks game. Seahawks are a good team, but we are the better team. I know it's on the road. I know the Packers don't have the greatest track record in Seattle in big games, but we are still the better team. And I do think, too, that at that point in the season, I think we'll be in a position where losing those games, as far as like standings and playoff picture and all that stuff, won't hurt too much. I do think what it will hurt is, to your point, you don't want to start falling off of the wagon when you're talking about those late November, early December games, because now you're starting to make that push and really get that momentum for the postseason. The one thing that we did a great job of last season is we started to get one, because we wanted to make the playoffs. We started to get on a roll in this time of the year. We won that big game against the Lions in Detroit on Thanksgiving and kind of sailed into the playoffs off of that. And that's how we got to make that deep playoff run. Of the 5, and I do want to get your thoughts on this, of the 5, the one that's most concerning to me is the game against the Lions. Like, I recognize that we have to play the Eagles, but like the Eagles are a better team than we are, sure, but there's still a lot of question marks about that football team. They have a lot of new pieces coming in. They've got a lot of changes happening on both sides of the ball. I think that game could go either way. As I said, the Dolphins, I get it. We're coming off a tough game against the 49ers, but like the Dolphins in a vacuum, you don't know what kind of Dolphins team you're getting on a week-to-week basis. The Lions, it's a divisional game. They're likely the better team. It can go either way. I think that'll be a tough one. And then we go into the Seahawks and the Saints. Neither of those teams are necessarily teams that you'd be worried about. I do think that the Seahawks could cause us some trouble because we're coming off of 2 games back-to-back that are going to be tough at home. And if we're going to be honest, that first Bears game in Chicago could also be a tough game as well because we're be coming off of a bye. Like we're basically playing we have 3 divisional games in 5 weeks. We have the Lions week 9, we have our bye, then we go to the Chicago, then we play the 49ers, and then we have to play the Lions 2 weeks after that. Like that's a tough stretch. Primetime game specifically, though, the Lions game is the one that I'm most concerned about just because it's coming off of 2, maybe 3 really tough games. And that 3-game stretch, Chicago, San Francisco, Miami, that'll define the season to me, I think.
I agree. So are you asking then which primetime game I'm worried about most then?
Yeah.
I'm not going to repeat this because obviously it's a Detroit game. For simple, logistics, it's a division game. And You could argue that these are the 2 best teams in the division, although I suspect Chicago may have something to say about it as depending on how well Caleb Williams develops, how quickly he can develop. But you're arguably talking about the 2 best teams in the division. So obviously, I think that's the one, and especially the stretch you're talking about. And later on in the show, I'm really going to show you what stretch I'm concerned about because I think you're getting, even before that, there is really a bad stretch in this situation. I have it starting quickly, but there is a stretch I'm very concerned about. But so I'm going to get past that because obviously the Lions game is the one that, of all the primetime games, you're concerned about. I think to start the season in Brazil is the other one then. I'm not concerned more so than immediately, we have a new defensive coordinator in Jeff Hafley. And not just a new one, but he's bringing a completely new system, a 4-3, where he wants all the eyes on the ball. And if you hear out of OTAs, everyone keeps saying he doesn't want you to think about what you're doing anymore. It's not about, it's like just read and react. Just play fast, play loose, and he will take the bullets. So we are going to get tested immediately because not only now are you facing Devontae Smith, you're facing A.J. Brown. Now you're facing this vaunted rushing attack. And we've talked about this over and over, Dwayne. If there is a problem that the Packers have had over the last 10 years, it's stopping the run. Yeah. So now we're going to be tested. Thankfully, we just shored up inside linebacker. So I think that pairing is going to be good. But it's all good to say this is going to be good on paper. Saquon Barkley, and if they have a healthy Jalen Hurts, will test our run defense immediately. So I think how fast do we adjust to what Hafley is teaching in OTAs and then in minicamp will be tested by the Eagles. So I think that is the perfect opening match, and I'm glad that we're not playing in Philadelphia. So it's kind of like a road game for both of us because I think in Philadelphia it may not go well. So that's the other primetime game. It's the first game of the season, but I want to see how fast that these players adjust, especially up front, right? Because if you hear them talk about it, right, now also we've had issues also with the pass rush. And now you've gone to putting our outside linebackers as guys with their hands down up front. I think we're going to solve the pass rush, switching to a 4-3, having Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith have their hands down the ground instead of a 2-point stance. That's the primetime game I'm actually looking at, the season opener.
The one thing I will say about the primetime games is last season when we had 2 consecutive primetime games in a row, we had it twice. It was from week 4 to week 5, and then again from week 13 to week 14. In week 4, we lost to the Lions on the Thursday night game, and then we played the Raiders going into the bye on Monday night, and we did not collect ourselves off of that rest, and we lost the game we shouldn't have lost to the Raiders. You turn around, and then you go to Kansas City. We're the only team last season to hold Kansas City under 20 points, which is fantastic. And then we go from that on Sunday night to a Monday night game against the Giants, and that transition was also not great. We came into that game against the Giants very, very sloppy. My one major concern about this schedule is the Packers showed us last season, specifically Matt LaFleur, that much rest is not good. Now, maybe it's not that good because there's a lot of young pieces, a lot of new parts into this offense, and so that's the issue. This team is slightly older, obviously made a deep playoff run, but still a pretty young team, one of the youngest teams in the NFL still, despite the fact that they are all a year older. And again, you're talking about a game where you're going from a tough game, whether it's going to be at home or in San Francisco, a tough game against the 49ers, and it's going to be an emotional one because We should have won that game against San Francisco, and we did not. So, and that's always the case. That's always the case with Green Bay when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers in the playoffs. It's always a game that's like, man, we should have won that game. So you have that to go for you. You're coming off of that. You're getting extended rest because you're playing you're getting only 3 days because you're playing the Thursday night game, but it's a home game, so it's cool against the Dolphins. You're going from that to the next Thursday night game. You got a full week of rest, so it's just like regular rest to Detroit. Then you have extended rest because you're playing the Sunday night game in Seattle. And then you have extended rest again. You have 8 days of rest, technically, because you have to play the Saints at home. What we saw last season in both instances where we had more than 7 days of rest is that this team comes out sloppy if they have more than regular rest. And so while on paper, it's great to see that you've got 4 primetime games in a row, 5 overall. If they're going to be great tests for this young team yet again, they're likely going to make or break our playoff push, our divisional standings, our NFC standings, all of that. I am concerned about just the amount of rest that they're getting because it's not regular rest. And so far through obviously a 1-season sample size, it seems like this team, as young as it is, does better off of regular 7-day rest than they do when they have extended rest. Because even if you look at the game after the bye, that game we had after the bye last season, we came into that game sloppy, just too much rest. This bye being this late, a week 11 bye, a week 10 bye, whatever it is, going into this back stretch of the season, when you have, again, all that extra rest, while on paper it's great because you're talking about if there's any injuries at all, right? You can kind of recuperate, but at the same time, we saw what it looked like last season when the Packers had extended rest, and it didn't go so well all the time. So I'm hoping that when we talk about a lot of the things that we've seen out of OTAs as far as, learning from last season's mistakes, things being night and day, as Jordan Love said, and as several others have said, I'm hoping that that is one of those night and day scenarios where they can learn from those mistakes that were made last season and be better coming off of extended rest, because that 4-week stretch, I've said it 4 times now, I'm going to say it a fifth, that 4-week stretch is going to make or break our season.
I will agree. And I think part of the thing is maybe I don't know practice habits. I don't know what's been going on, because if you're going to talk about, like, to your point, those days off tells me then that you're not practicing as hard or you're not in tune to, the details as you should be. Yeah. Because you would feel like an extra day of rest, you should be sharper because your body is rested, you're recovering from injuries, and then you have that extra day of preparation, like you're tuned in. So it tells me that I hope, for one, that Matt LaFleur is better at, fine-tuning the details as you go into the next game. And then on top of that, I hope a year of experience, because we have to admit, a lot of these players were either rookies or second-year players last year. I mean, particularly on the offense. I've changed my tune. I don't think I'm as worried about the defense this year. And so know that, I like the sounding of what everyone is saying about the defense with Halfley. And we are on the veteran end in terms of at least being up front. Yeah. But going back to what I'm saying, on offense, no. Second-year players have become third-year players. Rookies are now sophomores. So hopefully now the experience of what happened last year, now they can learn from that, and we will be a lot sharper with an added day of rest.
So the other big thing, too, for the Packers is when you talk about this schedule is when I looked at this schedule and as I was putting my predictions together, I looked at it and I saw 3 games that we absolutely had to win. 2 of them are one of them is kind of like a debatable. It might not be a must win. I think that one's kind of just like it'll be interesting, and it could be a must win as far as what you can look like down the road. But there are 2 games for sure that I have marked down as must wins for 2 very different reasons. Do you have any must win games for the Packers this season? Like games that undeniably they have to win?
So I'm glad you brought up the stretch, because that's where I'm going with this, right? I think. Hold on, I want to bring up the notes here. There is a particularly tricky schedule, right? When you get past, and forgive me, Packer fans, I don't want to put knock on wood here, right? I have a situation where I think we can start 5-1, 6-0, quite honestly. Like, if we could get out to a good start against, you see, like if we could get out to that a good feel in that Eagles season opener, right? Yeah. When you get past that, right, you're talking about the Colts at home. The Titans are rebuilding, and so even though that's when we got the Titans, the Vikings are complete rebuild mode, and the Rams, we don't have a recent history of losing to the Rams. Like, Sean McVay has a problem beating all these disciples. So he has a problem beating Matt LaFleur. And then the Cardinals at home, and Cardinals again are another building team. So like I have us starting either like 5-1, 6-0. This stretch though, where it gets tricky, you have Houston, Jacksonville, Detroit, Chicago on the road, the 49ers, right? And then, like you mentioned, the Dolphins Thanksgiving game. Even though as tricky as they are, like if the Dolphins gonna beat us 2 seasons ago at home, I don't think that if Lambeau is cold that they're coming here. So that's a very tricky part of the schedule going into December. And you and I talked about this off camera. December, where we only have one home game when it's supposed to be cold and we have that advantage, that clear advantage, right?
Right.
Is that December schedule where I honestly believe we're going to have, where 3 of the 4 games are on the road, we are going to have to come away hopefully losing just one of those games. So maybe we probably lose in Detroit, even though we won last year. I have this stretch here on the road against the Seahawks, at home against the Saints, and on the road against Minnesota. That stretch there, that 3-game stretch there, I have those 3 games as must-win games going in because that schedule, as I said, if you start 5-1, 6-0, that middle schedule is going to be tough, and we only have one home game. I know it's against weaker competition, the Seahawks, the Saints, and the Vikings, but that 3-game stretch, I feel that we have, 4-game stretch in December with also Detroit ahead of that. I think we should do no worse than 3-1. I think we have to come out of that stretch 3-1.
That's fair. And I definitely agree with you. I don't like the fact that we only have one home game in December. I do think though that it won't be like December cold. I do think though that going back to the Dolphins on the road on Thanksgiving is still going to be a tough game for them just because it might not be December cold in Lambeau, but it's also not going to be 68, 70, 72.
Yeah, it's not 75 degrees.
Yeah, it's not going to be 75 degrees and sunny the way that it would be in Miami around that time of year. So I do like that. I have 3 must-win games for the Packers. I'll start with the first one because it's not really a must-win. It's just a game that I would like for us to win because it's an important game. It's the game against the Texans in Week 7. By no stretch of the imagination, I think that's a must-win game. Like I don't think it's going to be a terrible thing if we lose that game, just because I do think that while on paper we do have the better team, I mean they have the better quarterback, and that's really all that matters in the NFL is if your quarterback is better. I also look at Nico Collins and Tank Dell, and while I love our 1-2 punch of Christian Watson and Jaden Reed, they're better. And I definitely think that the Houston Texans could have fared better in the playoffs if Tank Dell wasn't hurt. I think they would have been to the AFC. I think they would have been in the AFC Championship game actually if Tank Dell wasn't hurt. So you have to take a look at that as well. That is a game of it's a battle of 2 young teams, 2 young quarterbacks whose postseason debuts were nearly identical. Posted similar amount of points, threw for them similar amount of yards, had splits that were similar, completion percentage that were similar. Like Jordan Love and CJ Watt played very similar games in their wild card games. Obviously, Jordan Love goes a little bit further last season, the postseason, but that's just a game that's going to be interesting. It's a game that I would like for us to win. It's not a must-win in the sense that it's a make or break of the season. It's a must-win in the sense of, to your point, we have the potential to start the season either 5-1 with a loss to the Eagles or 6-0. That game, whether we're 5-1 or 6-0, is going to determine how locked in this team really is to the long-term goal, which is hopefully competing for and winning a championship in this season, which is, I think, very reasonable for them to do. The second game that I think is must-win, and it is a must-win for slightly unauthorized reasons, it's our first game against the Bears for a bunch of reasons. Number 1, it's out of a bye. Number 2, it's our second divisional game, and our first divisional game in what's going to be or a divisional game before, as we talked about so far, a stretch of very tough games. But more importantly, I'm getting sick of Mike Hughes. Mike Hughes, the Shy Kid, host of the Shy Kid podcast on the Give It a Shot Network. Shout out Mike. I love Mike. Mike is great. I'm getting sick of Mike Hughes talking all this Chicago Bears nonsense to me on Instagram. I'm getting sick of it. And I'm getting sick of Chicago Bears fans in general. They think they're treating Caleb Williams like he's the great black hope. I can't say he's the great white hope because he's not white, but like they're treating him like he's like Jesus and he's the savior of the masses, and they keep forgetting just how terrible their organization is. And so I need Jordan Love to go into Chicago and slap the Chicago Bears around. I need Josh Jacobs to give me 350 and 3. I need Christian Watson and 3. Wow. to show him who's boss. I need the Bears to understand that while, yeah, you got Caleb Williams and yeah, you got DeAndre Swift and Keenan Allen. That's cool. but you're not the Green Bay Packers, bro. You never have been, you never will be. So I need the Packers to go into Chicago. I need them to handle business. The third must-win game, and it actually is a must-win game because it's going to decide the division at this point and whether or not we're going to be able to particularly even be a 1 seed. It's the game against the Detroit Lions. It's on the road. It's the third of, or even fourth, if you want to say the Bears is a tough game, of a very tough stretch down the second half of the season, heading into December. The Detroit Lions are the better team. They have the better quarterback. They have the better supporting cast. We talk about it kind of bit on Instagram with some of the posts I've made. Like, they are the better football team. Obviously, they're the reigning NFC North champions. Obviously, they were in the NFC Championship game last season. They're the better football team. And we, as, you know, the runners-up last season, like, we have to be able to go into Detroit and win that game, more than just because it's for the division. The other thing, too, is the Detroit Lions have 7 games against the NFC this season. We have 6. So, and that's not including divisional games, obviously. So what the Detroit Lions have in their advantage is because they have that extra game, let's say they go 5-2 and we go, 4-2. We both lost the same number of games against the conference, but they have that extra one. And so that would give them any potential tiebreaker. So our hopes of having a 1 seed, having the playoffs run through Green Bay for the first time in a couple of years, really hinges on whether or not we can go to Detroit after Thanksgiving on the Thursday night game, put aside whatever happened in that game against Miami, whether it's a win or a loss, whatever, and go into Detroit and handle business, because that's going to decide our playoff fate. It's going to decide our divisional fate, obviously. And we're being honest, it's likely going to decide whether or not we can actually make a run for the Super Bowl, because as we all know, the difference between a Super Bowl appearance and not a Super Bowl appearance is 1 game. And it's never a postseason game. It's always, what's that 1 game in the regular season that you should have won that could have gotten you that 1 seed higher to get a home game, or 1 seed higher to get the bye, like whatever it is. So that game is super important. And our entire playoff outlook hinges on that game, because we're going to be a playoff team no matter what. It would take a catastrophic collapse for us to not be a playoff team. That game holds all of our championship and playoff aspirations in its hands. We have to go to Detroit. We have to win that game.
As I said, I don't disagree. And to start that rough schedule, as I said, to end the season with 3 of your 4 games in December on the road, and it starts with Detroit. Yeah, that's a very rough schedule. That's why I said after that, and I mean, I don't disagree. So that's why I targeted the 3 games after that, because if you come off a loss in Detroit, like, your playoff hopes are hinging. And to your point, I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't even think about that. Those 3 games directly after Detroit are all conference games, one of them being a division game. Like, you want Seahawks.
Oh, you're not including the Bears game at the end. Got you.
No, not including the Bears game at the end. So the 3. So if you want to throw in the Bears game, then you have 2 division games and 2 conference games directly after that. Like, you're going to want to clean up, and just for tiebreaker purposes, in case you lose the Detroit Lions game. Of course, you're not going in with the thought of, hey, let's lose this game. But the reality is you have a very, very tough schedule in the middle of the season.
Yeah. If we look at the entire schedule as a whole, if there's one game that sticks out to you as this is your favorite game, the game that you're circling on the calendar for whatever reason, I think we're going to have the same one. But what is that one game for you?
I'm going to let you take the San Francisco game. I'll let you go with that. So for me, right, the game I'm circling, favorite personally, right, I mean, this has nothing to do because it's a non-conference game. And for me, those usually mean absolutely nothing. Obviously, try to win all your games. But it's that Texans game because I'm circling that because I'm going to try my best to actually go to that game. I'm circling that because, like, I have an absolute love for CJ Stroud. Like, I love this kid. I love everything he represents on the field as a leader. I love everything he represents off of it. And as much as I love CJ Stroud, I think I love his head coach just as much, D'Amico Reigns. So, like, as you said, you alluded to it earlier in the podcast. These are 2 teams, essentially, like, same young quarterbacks, all going in the same direction, young leadership, young team overall. And I just want to see how those 2 teams match up. And so it's my favorite simply because it's a game I think I'm wanting to go. I've targeted that game. But for obvious reasons, getting past, my love for CJ Stroud and his head coach, it's a damn 49ers game. Like, and I'm shocked and appalled, right? I'm not even going to use shocked. I'm going to use appalled that the NFL found a way not to make this a primetime game. Even if it's the Saints, Like no one wants to see New Orleans in a primetime game. Like you want this
Probably,
matchup.
I don't know when flexing starts. They'll probably flex that game 100%. There's no way they
Like,
don't flex that game if we're being honest.
But how do you start? How do you come up?
That's a great point. Great point.
How do you sit down and start the schedule and knowing that two have to play in Lambeau and you're not making that a primetime game just for all of the history?
I think every other playoff matchup that's on the schedule is a primetime game.
And that's what I'm saying. All of these other playoff rematches, like you have all the history of these two franchises. I mean, I'm not even dating back to recent history. I mean, we're talking about all back in the 90s with Favre and Young. And somehow you're not putting this in prime time on top of last season's playoff success or playoff failure, on top of the fact of the Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan relationship and how their relationship fell apart over the courting of Aaron Rodgers. Are you crazy? Like someone in the NFL should be fired today, or the moment that schedule was released, right? That person needed to be fired.
I don't have any disagreements with you there. It is my favorite game of the year. Here's the thing. It's also my least favorite game of the year, though, because every other year I feel like we'll play the Niners in the playoffs. We'll lose to them. We'll get the regular season game, whether it's on the road or at home. We'll win that game. It gives us hope for the inevitable meeting in the postseason, and then we find another way to lose the game. This is a great opportunity for, I think, when you talk about measuring stick games, I think this is the measuring stick game on the schedule. The Texans game is not really a measuring stick game to me because these two teams are on the exact same level, in my opinion. They're in the exact, like the Texans, if everything goes right for them, can compete for a championship and make it to the Super Bowl this year. The Packers, if everything goes right for us this year, we can compete for a championship and make it to the Super Bowl. But the 49ers, first of all, bar none, best team on the schedule, obviously. But also, more importantly, though, like, this is not only a chance of redemption. This is, again, another one of those games of a peek into the future. Like, how do we fare against the 49ers? If we beat the 49ers, great. Let's figure out what we did in this game to then be able to replicate that when we play them again, because we will, unless something crazy happens with on their end of things. But also, if we lose to the 49ers, that's fine. Not that we're losing to them. You don't want to lose a game. But let's figure out what we can do to learn from this so that we can then beat them when it's time to play them again. I think that's the one thing that Matt LaFleur has been missing as the head coach is when we play the Niners, and if we've lost the Niners, especially in the playoffs, we do not always go back and figure out what didn't work so we can fix it and beat them the next time. What's always happened is we've come up with the exact same game plan, and for some reason, Shanahan's game plan just falls apart because someone gets hurt or something not clicking or someone just having a crappy night. It's never been, though, that the Packers, despite the fact that we've beat them a couple times, the Packers have never actually outplayed the 49ers, ever. It's never happened.
Well, hold on. I'll push back. The two playoff losses, two most recent ones, I want you to understand, right? First, we'll talk about last year's. Completely outplayed them.
Right.
Completely outplayed them. And again,
I would say to this point where, we outplayed them, but it's not a situation of like Matt LaFleur outcoached. Like that's what I mean by
whoa. So there's a rare
Matt
agree.
LaFleur was the better coach in that game. I think
none of these games. Like so, when you look at the situation, let's go last year's playoff game, settling for that field goal that missed, and you've had situations all throughout the season where you knew that Carlson showed you that this is not a reliable kicker down the stretch. The mere fact that you did not even have a kicking or somebody you didn't bring in to compete for the job going into playoffs was like, that was almost sabotage. Then you rely on that kick. We talked about that 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 in the first half that came back and bite us in the backside when, I won't even discuss that. And then there were other key moments, and every time, like when there are key moments that come down, because playoff games are decided by moments. Yeah. It is Matt LaFleur always comes up short because he's a bit, what's the word? He is conservative. So there's that game.
And that's putting it nicely.
I'm trying to be a nicer day now. And then the one at home, like everything that could have gone wrong in the end went wrong. And leading up to I think we gave up the blocked punt that led to their
I
game
saw the
time.
game when we held them to not score a touchdown and we
Yes,
lost that game.
That one. And that's
that game that made me want to take the Jair Alexander jersey I had and burn it to shreds because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. That game. The game that every other playoff team on both sides after that we'd beaten in the season, we would have won that game. Thank you.
That particular game again, we outplayed them, but again, some coaching decisions, that block punt, the big return for to start the second half. Again, it's all key moments, but so I honestly feel it is not a matter of can we play with the 49ers, can we outplay them? I think recent history, because we've won our last 2 regular season meetings, and we've outplayed them, in my estimation, in our last 2 playoff matchups. But it just comes down to key moments. And I would hope by now that Matt LaFleur has learned from these key moments following those 2 playoff losses and the playoff loss against Tampa Bay, which hurts me even more than those other 2, because I swear that we would have won a Super Bowl that year. But so that's a learning thing. And I don't know if a regular season game is going to show me what he's learned, because it's always in the postseason where these moments where Matt LaFleur does not shine. And I'm hoping now, year 6 for him, that, we can turn it around.
You better turn around in year 6. We might need to have some uncomfortable conversations about Matthew LaFleur. I'll tell you that much. All right. Record predictions. Mr. Justin Marvel, give it to me. How many games are the Green Bay Packers winning in 2024?
So when I look at this schedule, as I've told you, that middle part of the schedule is brutal in my estimation, and then only having 1 home game in December. And here's the funny thing, right? A number of things, like not barring injury, because you can't ever factor in injury here, right?
Of course.
I have seen, right, and you're gonna look at me funny when you say this. I've seen a number of scenarios from as far as us missing the playoffs altogether to us finishing 11-6. So I will be on. It's not exactly middle. I will say 10-7, because I can't.
Interesting.
Yeah, 10-7, because I can't expect us to win every single one of these big contests. Like, it's just not going to work that way, especially with the youth that you have and everyone trying to get accustomed, especially on the defensive end, to Jeff Hafley. I am going to see it. And also, you have 1 home game in December. Like, that's going to be tricky. We're going to lose 1 or 2 games that we probably shouldn't have, but we're probably going to win 1 or 2 games. It's like, whoa, where'd that come from? Yeah. So I am going to say 10-7, which sounds weird because I have a starting 5-1 at the very worst, at least 6-0. But I think, like I told you, that brutal stretch right up leading up to that December game against Detroit, that stretch is going to define our season. That's going to be very, very difficult. No, Mike Hughes, no, like
this is why we need to beat the Bears, bro.
Where does Mike Hughes live?
He lives in Chicago. He's from Chicago. He lives in Chicago.
No, he lives currently in Chicago. Can I get someone to like turn off his internet or something like that?
I hate Mike Hughes. I love Mike Hughes, but I hate him so much, man.
I don't have any shows with him, so I'm going to hate him right now. No, I'm just kidding, Mike Hughes. No, I'm not.
Well, I've got one with him, but I mean, it's not really a show with him. You just did something together.
This is why Mike Hughes, before you go, sorry, this is why Mike Hughes, I want you to know, right? I purposely do it every time because I fly out of Chicago. I purposely fly out of Chicago for this. Every time I go through O'Hare Airport, I have on Packers memorabilia of some sort. Not 1, but 2. It's my backpack and either a jersey or a hoodie. Every time. And just because of this, Mike Hughes, I will make sure it's a 3rd piece of paraphernalia. So go ahead.
Mike Hughes.
Just for you, Mike Hughes, and I hope I pass you through O'Hare. I mean, we could sit down and buy a burger, but I'm going to be wearing at least 3 pieces of Packer paraphernalia. But I'm going to say 10-7 because that stretch leading up to December is absolutely brutal.
So before I get into my official record prediction, I wanted to do something different this year with my record predictions. I'm starting with the Packers. What I have done is I have broken up all the possibilities for the Packers this season into 4 sections. A basement, which is absolutely everything has gone wrong. A floor, which is everything hasn't gone wrong, but at absolute worst in reasonable circumstances. This is what we're looking like. The ceiling, everything goes great within reason. And through the roof, everything has gone great beyond measure. And this is where we're at. So
Ooh,
Starting
I
first
like
with the basement. Our basement, Justin Marvel, is 7-10, third in the NFC North, and missed the playoffs. As you notice,
Right.
there is no scenario possible where we're in the dead last because the Minnesota Vikings are just that bad. So our
Yep.
basement, and what I mean by our basement is if we just do god awful in that backstretch and somehow we lose a game or two in the first 6 weeks that we have no business losing, we can find ourselves as a 7-10 football team. Our floor is matching exactly what we did last season. 9-8, second in the NFC North, except this time we lose a weekend earlier. I do not see a scenario realistically where we are in the basement. It would take something catastrophic like an injury or something to that effect. And we're going to knock on wood there. But our floor is 9-8, second NFC North, and losing in the wild card weekend, specifically because of that backstretch. In the 9-8 scenario, I think we go anywhere from 6-3 to 8-1 in the first 9 weeks, and then things just kind of fall apart in that backstretch. Going to the ceiling, our ceiling, if everything goes right within reasonable measure, that means we start off the season hot as we should the first 6 weeks of the season. We might even beat the Texans in week 7. Things get a little tough in that backstretch, but we find a way to stay over 500 in that backstretch. We can finish the season 12-5, first in the NFC North, and we lose in the NFC Championship game. So not only are we improving in the record, not only are we improving in the division, of course, but we're also getting one step closer to a Super Bowl. Through the roof for the Packers this season. Everything goes great beyond measure. We don't just start off hot. We actually start the season 7-0 in this scenario, maybe even 8-0 in this scenario. Taking our first loss to the Lions at home against Detroit. We go into the bye week. We come out of the bye week and we get things together. We still drop a couple here and there, but we've won enough games in the beginning of the season where we can finish the season 13-4, win the NFC North, and win Super Bowl 59. In a scenario where I'm going to take the thing off for this. Okay, I didn't mean to take it all the way off. We got butt naked there for a second. I didn't mean to. In a scenario where the Green Bay Packers are 13-4 and they're winning the Super Bowl, what that means for me and what would have to happen is I'm about to say Justin Herbert. Sorry, Jordan Love will have thrown for at least 4,500 yards. He would have at least 30 touchdowns and no more than 10 interceptions. We're talking about 1,000-yard receiving seasons from Christian Watson and Jaden Reed. We're talking about an exceptional regular season from Romeo Doubs, something we haven't seen before. And most importantly, in the receiving room anyways, we're talking about a big year 2 from Dontavian Wicks, which everyone is expecting. And if that's the case, we're looking at 13-4. Moreover, we're not just talking about the exact same run game with Josh Jacobs. We're talking about an improvement in the run game with Josh Jacobs because, to be honest, not only is he younger, I also think he's better than Aaron Jones. He's a lot more dynamic. Maybe not as good as a receiver out of the backfield as Aaron Jones, but not that much worse. But I do think he's a much more dynamic runner. He's a lot better through contact. He's a lot better hitting holes, and he's, I think, a lot better of a red zone running back as well. And then defensively, in order for us to be 13-4, the defense has to be a top 7, top 5 defense in the league. And on paper, I think the potential is there. We talked about in the draft episode, we talked about the additions of Edrin Cooper. We talked about what that means for the offense or what that means for the defense, especially if it pertains to stopping the run. If we're stopping the run and we're doing it the way that we need to be, that means that we're getting a lot of opportunities with the ball in our hands. And with this offense, I know it's young, but this offense has the potential to be explosive, has the potential to be a top 5 offense in the league. I think we can get there. And if we're 13-4 and winning the Super Bowl, that means that all of those things have happened. So through the roof for us is 13-4. With that being said, though, my official prediction is 11-6. I think we're going to be 11-6. I don't know what the game is that you have us losing that I don't have us losing. I'll be interested to figure out what that one game difference is. But I do think we're going to be 11-6 football team. And I think with that, even at 11-6, there's still a lot of great things to have happened there. I know it's only a 2-game difference from last season and 2-game improvement from last season. But 11-6 still puts in a position to not have to go on the road every single weekend the way that we had to do last year. So my official prediction for Green Bay this season is 11-6, which brings us down to NFC North predictions. How do you have the entire division shaking out from top to bottom?
I don't think it changes much from last season other than the bottom 2 swap positions. So you're going to see a situation where I have Detroit winning the division, the Packers in second, the Bears I can see a situation where the Bears are above 500 or just about 500 or just a game below 500. So I think the Bears are going to be either a game above or a game below 500. And then the Vikings in the floor. Like the legit, like whatever the floor is, beyond that, like below that.
Yeah.
I think the Vikings are going to be gosh awful.
They are going to be god awful. Here we go. Another cool graphic.
Ooh. Yeah, pretty much. That's what I have. Other than I'm going to give the Lions like a 12-5, 13-4 kind of vibes. But I like this. Yeah, this is exactly what I think. Yeah.
So my thing with the Lions, I do think we're going to match the Lions. I think what's going to come down to is that they have that 7th game in the NFC that's going to give them the tiebreaker. I do think we're going to split with them. So I have the Lions and the Packers 11-6. I think the Bears are going to be 9-8. I think the Bears ceiling, I hate to kind of say this, especially while Mike Hughes is watching, I think.
Then don't say it then.
I think the Bears could win 11 games this season. I really do. But that, again, that's their through the roof scenario, I'll be honest. The Minnesota Vikings they suck. They're going to suck. They're going to be they're not going to be the worst team in football because the Panthers and the Bears, or not the Bears, I'm sorry. The Panthers and the Cardinals and the Titans exist. So the Vikings won't be I did it again. Dang it. The Vikings won't be the worst team in football, but they will be contending for a top 5, top 7 pick because of how bad they're going to be. I don't think they have a direction. I do not think that J.J. McCarthy is the answer, especially not in year 1. And I think that this season is going to be tough because they didn't really make any major improvements. Like, all they did was just get a new quarterback, which I get it. It's better than Kellen Mond, whoever the backup is. But this team coming in is worse. Like, they made no,
I think so.
And the quarterback is worse.
And then you've lost all of these. You've lost all of these free agents and not really replaced them. Like, I have to believe that you're just looking to rebuild.
I agree. So that's why I have it. 11-6 for Detroit and Green Bay, 9-8 for the Bears, 5-12 for the Vikings. In that scenario, which I'll do my playoff picture a little bit later in the season. I actually do have the Packers in the NFC Championship game as an 11-6 football team. And I'll talk about that when that time comes. But this is great, man.
In San Francisco?
No.
Okay.
No, I think the NFC Championship game is going to be in Green Bay this year.
Ooh, I like that.
I think it's going to be in Green Bay this year. We'll talk about how in a second. We'll talk about how in a couple weeks when we get closer to the season. It's time to really lock them in. This is great. As always, episode 2 of the Pack a Punch podcast is in the book, and it's exception. Always a pleasure talking any type of football with my guy, Justin Marvel. Even better when I get to talk Packers football with my guy, Justin Marvel, Don in the green and the gold. Shout out to Germ.
Brett Favre, too.
For me. Brett Favre, you got the Brett Favre on this. I think I'm in the market for a new jersey. I am going to get a white one. I don't know which one yet. I'm not going to lie to you. I have 4 in my cart right now. I do not have the financial ability to buy all 4. Really. Not all at the same time. I'll probably get all 4 by the end of the season. I'm looking at, I have a Jaden Reed jersey in my,
nice,
I told you.
Nice.
Jaden Reed is coming in the cost. I told you that already. I do have a Jaden Reed jersey in my cart. I do have a Jordan Love jersey in my cart because I got to have my quarterback. I also have a Christian Watson jersey. And I wanted to get another defensive player, and I wasn't really sure who because I really wanted to sit down and think about it. I'm showing love to Quay Walker this season. I'm going to buy a Quay Walker jersey before the season's over. And so those are the 4. I don't know which one I'm going to get first, probably the Jaden Reed jersey. But it is always a pleasure to talk football of any kind, especially Packers football with my guy, Justin Marvel. Thank all of you guys who watched live. Thank all of you guys who are going to be watching, unless your name is Mike Hughes. I don't care that you watched, actually. In fact, Mike, when I see you in a couple months here, we're gonna have to have a conversation about all this Bears propaganda you're spewing all over my pro Packers nonsense. I don't like the nonsense.
Mike Hughes.
I don't like the nonsense I'm saying from Mike Hughes. Please, as always, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot of great stuff happening on the network, whether it's Pack a Punch, whether it's Protect Our Queens, whether it's The Divide, High Spot Podcast, The Shy Kid Podcast, Stuff About Sports. There's a lot of great stuff happening on the network. JT and the Don, almost forgot. Sorry, bro. A lot of great stuff happening, so feel free to tap in at all times. Follow. If you want more from Pack a Punch, specifically short-form content, just follow me on Instagram at marcus.talks.sports. You'll also find Protect Our Queens content there as well. You can also follow Protect Our Queens at PO Queens or Protect Our Queens _ on Instagram. So for my guy, Justin Marvel, this is Marcus of the Pack a Punch podcast, signing off. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, go Pack, go.
Peace.